welcome to a brand new episode of Happy Mum, Happy Baby, the podcast. I am so excited about today's guest. She really does inject the humour into everyday motherhood and to being a woman. She's a comedian, she's an author, a Sunday Times best-selling author, no less. It's Sophie McCartney, aka Tired and Tested. I think now is a really good time to confess that when I first saw your Instagram handle, for quite a long time, I was so tired and tested that I read it as tried and tested. And I know that it is a play on that, but my tired and tested mind, it turned into that.
Yeah, it was a slight error on my part because I did exactly that. I was like, oh, tired and tested, tried and tested, and then just didn't foresee that actually everybody would just read it as tried and tested. So I think there is actually, I think there's a Facebook
I thought it was just a me thing.
No. Every radio interview I do, everything I do, it's Sophie from Tried and Tested. And then I'm like, hi, it's tired. And then I can't correct anybody. So I then have to live as tried and tested. And there is somebody else who is tried and tested. And they have a lovely Facebook page. They have a lovely Facebook page, but lots of people go there thinking that that's me. And they go, I've got all these lovely days out. And I'm like, okay, but that's not me.
Well, I did the same with Scummy Mummies, and I thought Scummy Mummies were Scrummy Mummies for quite a long time. So it's definitely my brain just doesn't. It's very tired.
Well, yeah, I mean, we haven't picked the right audience, have we, for like tired mothers, just to confuse them even further. So yeah, sorry, my bad. I should have just stuck with Sophie. Nobody actually knows my name is Sophie. I should have just gone with Sophie McCartney. That's just what I should have gone with. I think whenever I talk to anybody now who's like, oh, have you got any advice about how to set up doing something like what you did? I'm like, just use your own name. Just use your own name.
Really? But then I think it really kind of, also, once you know exactly what it is, either if you don't know what it is or if you do know what it is, it says what it is. Do you know what I mean? It lets you know that you're in for a bit of a ride.
That's it. Yeah, it is. Once you've actually understood it and you've got there, and then you're there. Once you're there, it's great. It's just to get in there.
I would say that you're one of like the OGs when it comes to doing what you do.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? I was thinking about this the other day. I think it's about 2017, I think, which doesn't make me kind of too long in the tooth in the game. But yeah, I've been here for quite a while.
You started on Facebook, right? Yeah. But did you start on Facebook and then move over to Instagram?
Yeah, so I started Facebook first, and then, I mean, Instagram was quite soon after. But to be honest, I didn't really do too much on Instagram. I didn't understand Instagram, whereas now Instagram is my life. I was like, why are these people just posting stories of themselves? I was like, I don't get it. And Twitter, never did Twitter. I was famously once quoted as saying Twitter would never catch on. I was like, what is this? Twitter will never catch on. And now we have Threads. Anyway, so Twitter's died a death. It doesn't matter now, so it's all good. So yeah, Facebook originally. And then I think probably what I liked about Facebook was that it kind of felt quite community orientated, and that's, you know, and it felt like a big group of us mums, and you know, I'd post pictures or I'd post videos, and then everybody in the comments would start off other little kind of threads of conversation that other people, and sometimes I wasn't even part of those conversations, and just other people who followed would just be having lovely little conversations with the people who were in those groups. So yeah, Facebook felt like quite a safe place for me. And then when I started doing longer form content, so I would do kind of 3, 4, 5 minute videos, I'd do lives that'd be on for kind of 40 minutes at a time, and Facebook favors the length. And so I found that actually I could progress and grow quite well on Facebook as opposed to Instagram. It was kind of learning 2 different platforms really, and trying to see where I sat, and kind of now I feel like I sit across both of them, but I just have to adapt what I do accordingly for both of them nowadays when I have the time.
Where did you grow up? What was your childhood like?
So I grew up in Liverpool, and I know I don't sound particularly Scouse, but if I was very drunk and very angry right now, I would be incredibly Scouse. Or just shouting my husband's name whenever I go, Steve. That tends to be quite Scouse as well. Or whenever I see my mum and dad, my husband's always like, oh, have you been to see mum today? I'm like, okay. So yeah, Liverpool. My mum, my dad, my mum's a primary school teacher. My dad had kind of various different jobs. I was growing up. He was a printer. He was a salesman. I have an older sister. She's 3 years older than me. And yeah, we lived in Liverpool all of my life until I got to 18, and it was time to fly the nest. And I went to Leeds Met Uni. I was very determined that I wanted to leave. I mean, Liverpool's a great city, and I had loads of friends then. A lot of my friends were staying. But again, I've always kind of wanted to hop about. And I mean, I do this with houses as well. You know, we buy a house and then a couple of years later I'm like, shall we move? I don't know, there's just something in me that always kind of wants to jump on a little bit to the next and do things and see different things. And so I was very determined I was moving away. So I went to Leeds to go and do public relations, not pubic relations, which my dad was very concerned about. Although to be fair, there was a little bit of that. There was a little bit.
Well, it's uni days, of course there was.
It was exactly. It was the early noughties. You know, I'd gone to an all-girls Church of England high school. You know, I had seats to sew. So I had a great time at uni. I got a 2-2 in public relations, and then I got a Desmond, but I had a great time doing it. So that was my life lessons that I learned there. Acquired a load of student debt buying Red or Dead shoes that I couldn't afford at the time, and going out drinking, but had a ball. And then met my husband there, then my to-be husband. And so, you know, I feel that it set me on a course that I was meant to be on. It was my trajectory that I was meant to go to Leeds Met. I was meant to get very drunk at Thursday night in a club called Evolution, and I was meant to meet my husband after one too many Apple VKs with a cheeky shot of vodka in.
So how far into your uni experience did you meet him?
So he was in my third year, which I feel was actually quite a good time. We both had a lot of fun, some more than others, Steve, with kind of meeting other potential partners, and you know, and yeah, he felt right. And yeah, I think it was September. I think we'd only just come back, and we started dating, and that was it. He was my person. I latched onto him and wouldn't let him go. And that was what, 2004. So my gosh, nearly 20 years into Steve being held hostage in a relationship.
And did you stay up north after that, or did you come and move down south?
Yeah, so we stayed in Leeds for about another year. I love Leeds. So yeah, I stayed there for a year, and then so Steve's a physio, so he started working in the NHS, and he got a job down London way. And then for me, because I was in PR, it actually just made quite good sense. So off we packed to follow our dreams of earning 12 grand a year in the big city. not being able to afford to eat, drink. We couldn't actually even live in London. We lived in Watford, and I claimed it was London because we had the end of the Metropolitan line, and my theory was that if you had a tube stop, you lived in London. So went around telling everybody that I lived in London when actually I lived in Watford. And we did that for a few years, and then Steve works in football, so he kind of bounces around, and had been at various different clubs, and we ended up in Norwich, so we went and lived in Norwich for a bit. But again, this all kind of played very nicely into my wanting to move around. So it was good fun. We always get, you know, every couple of years we were in a different city. So it's great, you know, meeting lots of new people, different life experiences. And then after that, before we had the kids, just a year, I think, after we got married, we were married quite young, child bride. I was just turned 25. It was like a week after my 25th birthday. Yeah, tied him in. No escape. And so we got married, and then we went and quit our jobs and went traveling for a year. Just went, you know what? There's a lot of things that we want to do before we think about having kids, and we were still quite young, and so we jacked our jobs in and off we went and did a year abroad, backpacking. Well, I say backpacking. Steve had a backpack. I had a pull along case that I then made him carry.
The perfect traveling essential, a roll along suitcase.
Yes, with my GHDs. all the essentials in all the awful backpacking youth hostels.
Had you talked about kids before that point? And did you know that year was kind of like this is an our year thing?
Is it.
Because that's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it might be something that we do again when we're older, when the kids have flown the nest. But I think at that particular time I hadn't taken any kind of year out between going from high school into uni, and you know, I wanted to see a bit of the world, and we knew we wanted kids, and we probably quite soon, you know, getting down to it. So it was the perfect opportunity, really. And because at the time we were living in Norwich, and it felt like a clean break to leave somewhere like that, to go away for a year and then try and maybe move back a little bit closer to home. Because if I was having kids, Steve was away a lot with work, and I wanted to be closer to my mum and dad. So we were like, okay, let's go and do this. Let's go see the world, you know, go and do exciting things, then come back and then think about babies. Yeah, so we did that. And then babies came along about a year after we got back.
Did you start thinking about it and trying straight away when you got back, or did you give it a bit of time?
No, we were pretty soon, actually. I think we'd got back. No, we got a dog first. We did that stupid thing that people do before they have children, and they think that they're going to get a dog because it's going to help them become a better parent. And then you get a dog and you go, oh my God, this is nothing like having a child. For one, you don't have a 4-week-old child that goes and chews through electrical cables. So it was a steep learning curve, but we have Millicent, our first baby, our fur baby. So we had Mills, we bedded Mills in. So it was about 9-10 months after we got back that we then started. And then I was really lucky. I fell pregnant really quickly with Jack. Steve was devastated. He'd been told he'd been told all the sex, all that top-notch Randy bonking for months. And I was like, oh my God, I've come off the pill, I'm pregnant. He was like, what is this? I'm so sick, don't touch me. For the entirety of the pregnancy. And then that was it, and that was Jack, and then they all just then came after Jack. He was the gateway baby.
Yeah, can you remember getting pregnant that first time and seeing that pregnancy test?
Oh yeah, I didn't believe it. And do you know what, actually, I say I was sick, I actually had no symptoms with Jack whatsoever up until I went for the scan. And then all my pregnancy symptoms, all my sickness came after the 12-week mark, and then I was horrendously sick up until about 30 something weeks with him. But up until actually going to the scan, I was convinced I was having a phantom pregnancy. I didn't have sore boobs, I didn't have anything, and I was just so scared that I was going to go to that scan and there was going to be nothing, because I did not feel pregnant whatsoever. So even when I must have done so many tests, and actually the first test that we did, we were on holiday, we were in Portugal, and Steve and I'd had a massive fight. We'd had a huge Barney. We'd had a hire car, and I'd opened the door onto a wall and just smashed the side of the door in. And he'd gone mad at me. He was just like, oh my God, we're going to have to pay on the excess. And I said, sorry. So we'd had this big falling out, and words had been said, and we weren't speaking. And we'd gone for dinner, and we were both kind of sat arms crossed, looking out of the window, not speaking to each other. And I was thinking, am I so moody because I'm hormonal? And then I thought, that's the time I had my period. And then I'm sitting there kind of fuming with him, but also thinking, I think I'm pregnant. And then I was like, oh no. So then we had to go and find a pharmacy.
Did you say that to him?
Yeah, I was like, I know you're really angry with me. I was like, so ladies,
let's soften the blow.
If you ever want to get yourself out of an argument that you've had with your husband or your partner, tell them that you think you're pregnant, and then suddenly the walls come down quite quickly. So we'd gone off to go and try and find a pharmacist in this beautiful town in the Algarve. It was Lagos, I think it is. And we went and found this pharmacy. They did not speak a word of English. It was quite a judgmental, I would say, older lady pharmacist who we must have looked quite young as well at the time, who was kind of eyeing us up and down, and I'm trying to explain pregnancy test, like the whole Bridget Jones, like baby. And then we got the test, went back to the room, and it was one side of the instructions was in Spanish and the other was in Portuguese. And when we did, it was really helpful. And then when we did the test, it came up as a very, very faint line as the kind of the second line. And on the instructions, there was a little bit that explained what that meant, but it was in Spanish or Portuguese. So Steve had to take the test and the instruction leaflet down to the receptionist to go and ask him what it meant. And then, so the receptionist and Steve knew that I was pregnant before I was pregnant. And then Steve just came back to the door with a bottle of champagne that the receptionist had given him, and he was like, yes. And I was like, did you bring me Pringles? Because I can't have that. Where's my treat? No? Okay. So he drank a bottle of champagne, fell asleep on the bed. It's great.
Nice. I mean, after years and years and years, though, of being students, of, having that early adult life and then going traveling, that must have felt like a massive gear change.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so I was, at this point, I just turned 28. Yeah, only just turned 28. And nobody else that I knew was pregnant. I was the first of all of my friends to even get married and then think about babies. And just nobody else seemed to be at that stage in their lives. People had met partners a bit later on. People were still single. People just didn't even have it on the radar. So I was kind of there on my own going through emotions, just grossing them all out with my, you know, weird pregnancy things, being like, hey girls, guess what's just happened to me? Like taking a photo of something weird. And they were like,
I've got piles.
yeah, yay. And I think probably my only friend was, you know, the kind of the Mumsnet forums. And I think they just terrified me more than actually anything else. I had the, you know, what to expect when you're expecting book. I'd all, you know, all of that I was trying to swat up and do things on my own. Went to NCT classes. And I was the youngest in all of my NCT classes, which I wasn't expecting. And then I think I then just felt like quite the young, inexperienced one. And so I felt actually quite isolated and alone, I think, during my first pregnancy, because I just didn't have anybody else to share it with and go through it with. Which then actually, when I did have Jack, that then carried through into my first pregnancy, because again, I didn't feel like I'd made a good kind of connection with anybody really that was in the group. I didn't, you know, really have, I'd go and do the kind of the odd coffee or two, but it just kind of felt like I was like, oh, hello, I'm just talking to you because you have a baby as well. And you know, I kind of like forced friendships.
Rather than.
Yeah, exactly. And if we did not have these children right now, we'd have nothing, bar the weather. There would be nothing else to talk about right now. So yeah, I felt a little bit kind of on my Todd a little bit with him. And it probably wasn't until I had Evelyn, number 2, that I'd already established some friendship groups, and people had said it to me. They just said, oh, wait till your first goes to school, and that's when all your friends come. And that is so true, because now all of my besties who I see day in, day out, they're all the school mums, mums. So that is now my circle. They are my people.
A lot of people worry about the school gate thing though.
Yeah, they do. And do you know what? I hear that a lot, and people say, oh, you're so lucky to have found kind of your school mum friends. And it can be quite cliquey, and things go down in our school, the WhatsApp groups. Oh my gosh. I've actually refused to join Evelyn's WhatsApp group, and it's nothing against the people. Oh, I'm the rebel of the year who always forgets Forest School because I'm not on the group. We never bring a pound in on the right day because I'm not on there. But I was just the Jack's group. It's you know, you'd go to the toilet, you come back, there's 80 unread WhatsApp messages about what can go in the lunchbox, and I'm like, I don't care. He's having a school dinner. I don't care. And so yes, when Evelyn's year group came, I just was like, I'm at this point, I was like, I'm a seasoned pro. I've already got one in school. I don't need to be in this. And then, or what I do then is then I have to text all my friends in the morning and go, what have I forgotten? What do I need to do today? Yeah. So everybody else runs as my admin assistants because I'm not on the group.
See, my one thing was that I wanted Tom to be in the group as well, because I was like, I don't understand why it's all just the one parent.
Yeah, why is it generally the mums? Yeah, it's always the mums. Yeah, very true. I don't think any dads are actually in our group. It is really? All the mums. Yeah, now
I started it on most of our groups. I was like, add in Tom.
Poor Tom.
You know.
Thanks, G. Thanks.
Oh, come on, they're all on mute until you need something, and then you're like,
that's very true. Yeah, mute for 1 year.
How did you feel going towards Jack's birth?
Oh, I was so naive. I laugh. I do laugh about this, and I do a bit in my set about how naive that I was, because I was very, very worried that I might not know that I was in labour. I was like, I know. And you do, don't you? Beforehand, you're doing all this Googling of how will I know that I'm in labour? What should be the signs, God? And then it happens and you're like, oh, right, yeah, my head's spinning 360 degrees and I'm vomiting into a cardboard dish. Now I'm in labour, yay. And it was my biggest fear that I would birth him at home like a cat under a table, that I wouldn't be able to get to the hospital in time. Steve was having to work as well. So he was on a course. He was down in London and he had to do this course. But it was, he'd just been given the green light to say that if I went into labour, then obviously fine, you can go. But if I wasn't, he would have to be there. And I was 2 weeks late. So it was all kind of like, don't worry, babe, you'll have had the baby before, you know, this happens. And I was like, great, so I'll have had the baby and you're going away for a week, but okay, cool, thanks. And of course I went over. So I was 2 weeks over with him. I was ginormous, like pull of Jupiter, ginormous, absolutely huge. And I kept.
And how did that time feel from due date then? Like as each day went on?
Awful. Fortunately, he was a winter baby, so at least I wasn't sweating profusely like I was with Nate over last summer. But yeah, so just, and every week, and you get more and more anxious, don't you? And just, when's it going to happen? I think the anxiety as well of just thinking, am I just going to suddenly now go to the shops and just spontaneously go into labor because I'm just so far over now? When is it going to happen? And it just didn't. Every day I kept thinking, today's the day. And it just wasn't. And I'd had sweeps, I'd had everything going on, and he was just not shifting. And then I was booked in for an induction on, I think it was the Saturday, and then the Friday, I'd had a bit of a trickle of waters, and I'd called up and they were like, yeah, come down. So that, at that point, I was like, get yourself back up from London ASAP. And even then though, we went in and it was so stop start, even with the induction. And I think once they'd induced me, I was still about 24 hours after I'd started. So in all, I think it was about 2 days with the kind of ins and outs of labour, and then the induction, and then in coming out. And then he was an emergency section. So he was not coming for love nor money. And he was an emergency section because he was £10.10.
Oh my gosh, Sophie!
I know, he was ginormous. God love him. I mean, and he'd had the extra 2 weeks to cook, and it was only after he was born, and Steve was like, oh yeah, all the boys born on my side of the family are all £9 plus. And I was like, well, that would have been helpful to know like 10 years ago. At the point that we met in a club, I feel that that's your opening chat up line, so that anybody that you're then trying to coerce into a relationship with you knows what they're getting themselves into. £10.10. He said my cousin James was £13. I was like, oh my God. So it could have been worse. Yeah. So £10.10. And I had to be knocked out as well.
Oh, really?
I'd had an epidural, and that hadn't been sighted properly. So kind of I could still feel on one side of my body. So when they then tried to do the section, they just tried to top it up through the epidural. And as they were trying to cut me open, I was like, excuse me, I can feel that. And they're like, no, you can't. And I was like, no, I can. They're like, no, it's more of a sensation. I was like, it isn't. I can feel you cutting me with a scalpel. So then they had to knock me out, because then there just wasn't enough time to then try and
let's shut her up. Go on.
Okay. Night. And then I felt actually really quite triggered and traumatized by that. The kind of the last things that I remember, when that happens in that scenario, they have to give you something. This was all explained to me afterwards, but at the time I didn't know. But they have to give you something to stop you from vomiting, because they're giving you a general, and normally you wouldn't eat before having a general. And so I've been chucking away on my hamsanis in labour, keep your energy up. And so they poured something down my throat. They kind of held my throat down to it to go down. They'd strapped my arms into this gurney. Steve was thrown out of the room, and he'd been brilliant. He'd been very stoic up until that point. And then the minute that he was thrown out of the room, and I saw the panic in his face, and then I just lost it, and then I was unconscious. I just lost it, and then was asleep. And then when I came to, Steve was there holding him, and he was like, "It's a boy," and I was like, "Oh, I've been convinced it's a girl. It's a boy." Oh, he was £10.10. I was like, "What?" No bloody wonder he wouldn't come out. So that was Jack.
Did it take you a while to unpick the labour then? Did you have to go back in and talk through it?
So they offered me kind of phone counselling, but at the time I was like, no, I don't need it. But retrospectively, I did, because I carried that around with me for quite a long time. And I only really realised the extent of how much I carried that around when we started talking about trying for baby number 2. And I would just spontaneously cry just at the thought of it. And I think it was the prospect of having to go back in any kind of labour scenario about it. And I felt that I'd been really robbed of my birth experience. I felt like I wasn't present when he was born. I felt like none of his parents, none of his people who should have been there when he was brought into the room were there. Because Steve was out, I was out for the count, and they were just strangers that brought him into the room. And so I don't think I had postnatal depression. I don't think I'd go that far as saying that, but I definitely felt a slight disconnect especially in the first couple of weeks. And I don't know whether that was down to just being a new mum and not knowing what to expect, or the fact that I was unconscious and I felt that I hadn't had the experience that I'd had in my mind. And when people say about the birth plan, and this is what always, when anybody says, oh, if you've got any advice, I'm having my first baby, what kind of pearls of wisdom? And my biggest one is always just don't have a birth plan. Like, you can have a rough idea in your mind of how you would like things to go down and your choices in certain things, but don't be so rigid in your mind to be like, I'm just going to have a vaginal delivery, I'm going to have all the drugs, I'm going to have none of the drugs, just, you know, just have a backup, have a backup in your mind and go, well, do you know what? If it doesn't go that way, I'm actually okay with another way of a baby being born. And I think, you know, I then met people afterwards and again in this kind of NCT group where people would ask me about what happened, and there'd always be quite a sympathetic head tilt, or, you know, it was kind of insinuated that I hadn't done it properly. Oh, you had a section. It was that kind of slightly condescending, oh, you didn't do it, you didn't do it vaginally. No, because I'd have died. And, you know, but I felt bad. I felt like I'd done something wrong. And as well, because he was big, this is also a really weird thing that happened, because I guess people, you don't really hear of massive babies. I mean, he could have been bigger, but he was quite large. And I was felt or made to feel like I'd done something wrong. So I remember after he was born, some of the midwives on the unit came up and they wanted to come and have a look at the big baby. And bear in mind, I was a first time mum as well. And then I'd taken him for his first round of injections, and you know, when they're going through the red book, and she'd seen his birth weight, and she said, oh my goodness, what were you eating when you were pregnant? I was like, and it just compounded all these feelings inside of me that I'd done something wrong, that I'd produced this giant baby that I couldn't birth properly. It was my fault because he was big and I'd done something. I'd just, you know, been eating like a pig, which I hadn't. And, you know, actually doesn't really make that much of a difference. But anyway, but I had all the feels around his birth and kind of how things went down afterwards. And so that actually took me quite a bit of time to adjust to that. And probably it was only after I had Evelyn, and she was another emergency cesarean. So I tried to do a VBAC with her because I had such a hang up about the cesarean. And, you know, and the NHS were brilliant. They gave me a choice. They said, you can have a section if you have a section, but if you would like a vaginal birth, we're all for it. You know, it is possible. You've got a very high chance of being able to do this. Because you've only had one cesarean, you know, there are stats and figures that say this is totally fine for you to do this. I had growth scans with her, so we didn't know the gender of the baby either time. So, and I didn't want to know with Evelyn. So they said, we'll do growth scans. And, you know, if it is a girl, there's a chance that she won't be as big, like just genetically speaking, as a boy. So you stand a better chance of birthing a girl naturally anyway. So we had all the growth scans. She looked like an average size, and she came about a week early, and I still couldn't get her out. So she ended up as another emergency cesarean. As it happened, I had an infection that she had an infection, and our hearts just went bonkers, and they just went, nah, get this baby out. But I was awake. And so when she came out, and, you know, that was a slightly better, although still scary, it was a slightly better thing. And I think she was the turning point for me, where I went, you know what, it does not matter how that baby has come out of me. What matters is that they are alive, that everybody is fine, everybody came out of this the other end. And I don't really care if somebody gives me a sympathetic head tilt that I, again, didn't do it properly. I've got my baby. And it was probably, she was the turning point in that. And then I kind of was like, just let it be. And as I'd had a bit of a bad recovery with her as well. I've lost quite a lot of blood, and the consultant came in afterwards and looked at my chart, and he had a little chuckle to himself, and he went, right, if you ever have a third baby, you are having a planned cesarean. And I went, okay, I'm not having one. I'm not having another baby. Thanks very much. Cut to the boring bit in between Christmas and New Year last year, and, you know, hey.
And was that one a planned C-section?
No. So he well, he was actually technically an emergency section again. So he was booked in to be a planned section. And I have not had previous. So Evelyn was a week early, but that was fine. But Nate came 3 weeks early, and it was not an expected thing for that to happen. But I was so busy on the run up to having him. I was mid-book writing. I needed to finish. So this was the fiction. This was Mother Hens. And I'd sat down to start writing Mother Hens the day I found out that I was pregnant with Nate. And I was like, oh, this isn't good time whatsoever. But, you know, can't beat a publishing deadline with, you know, the pressure of a baby coming, can you? So that was probably the bigger deadline, was the baby. So I knew I only had, you know, at that point, like 8 and a bit or 7 and a bit months to get the book done. And I had 3 weeks left to get it over the line. And Nate went, nah, I'm coming now. Thanks. See you, losers. And to the point where I just thought I was having Braxton Hicks, and I'd been in and out of triage for various different things, because I'm a geriatric mother over the age of 35.
I love it though. Like when you think of your whole journey of like starting and being the youngest and feeling,
yeah, to be the old bird.
Yeah.
Experience, like that's it now. I was just like, oh, whatever. And he'd come, and I'd said I'd been for a big walk the day before with the kids. It was in the school holidays, and I'd said to Steve, I got to bed, I was like, I don't feel right, feel really niggly. And then I'd started cramping, but thought it was Braxton Hicks. And he was like, call the unit. I was like, I don't want to call the unit, because if I call the unit, they're going to make me go in. And he was like, why are you bothering me with this then? If you're not going to go into hospital. Stop waking me up to tell me things. I was like, okay. And then I called the unit, and they're like, no, you need to come in, because that was a planned section. And I drove myself, and I got about halfway to the hospital. I know, your face, I know. I was the worst idea I've ever had, because at that point I didn't know for sure. And Steve was with the kids, and I didn't want to wake my mum and dad up, who were 45 minutes away from us, to get them to come over if I just had Braxton Hicks. So I was like, it's fine, babe, go back to sleep. I'll let you know when I get to hospital, see what they say. And I'd got into the hospital, and they took one look at me, and they were like, we need to get your baby out in half an hour. And at that point, I know, because
Why?
they didn't. So because I was contracted at this point, I was contracting so quickly, I dropped down from kind of being really sporadic, like every 5, 7, 12, 14 minutes all over the shop, to being every 2 minutes. Their biggest worry was, I was only 1 centimetre dilated though, but their biggest worry was that I'd suddenly go from 1 centimetre to 10 centimetres. And they don't, because he was going to be a section anyway, regardless, they don't want you to be in full established labour, because it's just so much riskier. So they were like, nope, half an hour, getting that baby out. And then I was like, like calling Steve, trying to wake him back up. I was like, no, get here now. He's running across the road, banging on the neighbour's house to come and get the neighbours to come and sit in with the kids. And so it was quite stressful. I called my dad, woke my dad up, and he was like, bloody hell, Sophie, you've never been early for anything. And I was like, I appreciate the irony in the situation, but just get over to my house now. And then little Lady Chops was born, technically another emergency cesarean. So I've got the full sweep of 3 emergency sections under my belt.
Oh, and how much did he weigh?
He was £8, but he was 3 weeks early. So so Jack had an extra 5 weeks in the oven, more than Nate did. So Nate would have come out bigger, possibly bigger, I reckon, than that.
Don't
So
they say it's something like half a
£1 for every week they're in or something. Yeah, exactly. So he would have been ginormous, but then bless him, he wasn't breathing because his lungs weren't formed, and he had to go to NICU, and it was a right old faff and a drama. But again, he just completed that. Every one of my children, when they were born, like there was an issue. They all did NICU. They all had their time in NICU.
Did they?
All 3 of them. Yeah. Evelyn had an infection, so she had to do. Jack was poorly, so he got some kind of infection as well. So they all done a clean sweep of not a straightforward birth. I know, but that is it. 3 and out. We're not doing any more. There's no more shenanigans at Christmas time for Steve and I. Absolutely not. My nerves cannot take it. They cannot take it anymore. Yeah.
I love that. Well, that time will always be a little bit boring though, Sophie, so watch out.
I know. I'm going to be watching the Call the Midwife special, aren't I? Going, oh, maybe. Oh no.
You left it really a while to like announce as well.
Yeah, I did. And I think possibly because I was very anxious. I was the 3rd time. So I'd had a miscarriage during lockdown. Mm-hmm. And that was quite, miscarriage is awful, and in any situation. But I think
you had another miscarriage before between
Jack
and Evelyn as well, hadn't you?
I did, I did. And that was probably what I would call maybe a bit more of a straightforward kind of clear-cut miscarriage. I was pregnant, and then I just wasn't. And and it was all kind of just very clear-cut. And then with the one that happened in lockdown, it was like almost like a silent miscarriage. So I'd had a tiny bleed. It was barely anything, and it just irked me that I was just as it would. You'd see a bit of blood and you would panic, but then there was nothing. It was nothing like what had happened with the first one, which was very much like, oh wow, something awful is happening, and I need to go to a hospital. It wasn't like that. And so I'd called my midwife. It was still all a bit too soon. I think I was only about 7 weeks, I think. So I hadn't had my booking in appointment or anything.
Yeah.
And she'd got me an appointment. She's like, because it's COVID, normally you would be able to just go to an early pregnancy unit, self-refer yourself. But she's like, you do need a midwife. She's like, well, I'll get you sorted. So she got me an appointment the next day, but it was at the point where you couldn't have anybody go with you. So I had to go on my own. But by this point, I'd kind of talked myself around that it was fine because I'd not had any cramps. I'd not had anything else that was alarming. And I look at it now and I'm so plumbing stupid in my head. I was thinking, oh, maybe it's twins. Like maybe it's, just something else. So I hadn't really gone thinking they're going to tell me something awful. And so I'd kind of, Steve obviously wanted to come, but couldn't. And so I was like, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I'll be fine. And I got in there and I kind of, they did the scan and, they kind of then they take a bit longer and then they ask if they can, this is kind of the one like over your stomach. And then they ask if they can do an internal scan. And at the point they said, can we do the internal scan? I was like, no, something's not right. And basically there was a pregnancy sac and a yolk, but nothing was as big as it should have been for how many weeks along that I was. So at that point, they're like, it's nothing to panic about now. It could just be that your dates are off and you're just not as far along as you think that you are. But I knew, married mum with 2 kids. There was only like one point in the calendar in which it could have been. And I was like, no, I know conception point, and I know that this is how many weeks that I should be. And no. But because there was a question and there was something there, but there wasn't a clear miscarriage, I had to go away for 2 weeks and just wait. So they said, what'll happen is you'll either just miscarriage, that it will just happen on its own. You'll miscarry on your own and that'll be the end of it, or your pregnancy will proceed. And so I then had to go away for 2 weeks and go, oh my gosh. And I knew in my heart of hearts that, because I knew that the weeks didn't match up, and I just knew, but I had to live for 2 weeks of going, oh, but maybe. And then in that 2 weeks, it was just all the Googling, all the things that I shouldn't have done. And, and again, just dealing with it all on my own, really. It was still, you couldn't socialize, you couldn't go out and see your friends. I told one friend and she'd come and she'd drop things around on the doorstep, and she was very sweet, but still nobody could come in, couldn't do anything. And then I went back and I had the scan. And at that point, I'd been so distraught for 2 weeks, just aren't I?
Well, surely you couldn't think about anything.
No, exactly.
And at that point, I think that would have been the case anyway, but also during lockdown when the world isn't, as it usually is.
Yeah, everything. I mean, everybody just had heightened anxieties about everything, didn't they, during that time? And I'd already been very anxious, thinking, well, what if I got COVID? Because at that point I hadn't had it. What if I get COVID and I'm pregnant? What would that do to the baby? Because at that point nobody knew really, did they?
Yeah.
And so heightened anxiety across the board. And I'd gone back for this scan finally, counting every day down. Thought, well, you know what? At least today I will know one way or another. And then, so again, had to go on my own, and they did the scan, and there had been growth. There was something there that wasn't there before, but it was still way too small. So at this point I should have been 10 11 weeks, something like that, which yourself what a 12-week scan would look like. That is a fully formed baby jumping around, and it wasn't that. But because there was growth, they couldn't do anything. They said, they were like, well, in our eyes there is progression, and it's not their fault. They are following protocol to protect everybody in that situation, but they couldn't do anything. So they said, well, you have to send you away again, and you have to go back, and you'll either miscarry or there'll be further progression. So I had to go away again for another week and give it another week, and then come back again. And then on that third time of coming back, it was exactly the same. And again, I should have been 12 weeks. And at that point, it was very clear cut that was that. But my body just didn't get the memo that something wasn't right. So I was sick, my boobs were swollen, I still had every symptom that I would have associated with a normal pregnancy, but my body had I felt like it was tricking me. I felt that, and I felt really betrayed by myself that I didn't know I was like, how can I not know that this is, this would be my third baby? How would I not know that there isn't a baby inside of there? And so then, I had to have it because, again, COVID times, it was quicker as opposed to having a procedure to remove what was there. I had to have the medical, the tablets that
Tablets,
what was it? Yeah, it was, they were inserted. I didn't take them, and then sent home to miscarry at home, and then that was awful. That went wrong. Steve ended up having to drive me to A&E, and again, technically he shouldn't have been with me, but just the most lovely nurse in our local hospital just said, I'm not letting you miscarry on our hospital floor on your own, and she just ushered Steve into a side room with me, and they just looked after me brilliantly. And she was, I know, it was, she was, and in that instance, and you just think like the kindness of strangers that, she didn't have to, she was going against hospital policy to do that, but she just went, human rights like that, you're not doing that on your own. And that was that. So after that happened, I'd actually said, I don't want to do it again. I don't want to put anybody else through it. I didn't want to put myself through it. I just was like, I'm so lucky. I've got my 2 babies, and I am, I'm more than happy with my lot. I'm more than happy. I couldn't. And I think probably where Steve and I sat with the third was that neither of us would ever want to say, let's go for it and let's do it again. Yeah. And so as it turned out, the way that it happened, I feel that Nate was kind of destined to be, because we weren't trying for him, and it wasn't even so much of a close call accident or surprise. I'd randomly had a 42-day cycle of my period, which has never happened to me before. When we look back and we counted as to, I should have been well past ovulation at the point of that bit in between Christmas and New Year, and we thought that it was absolutely fine. And my body had just held on for a little bit longer and ovulated later, and there was Nate. And so going back to it, I didn't announce for quite a while when I was pregnant with him, because I was just, every day I was expecting something to happen, something to go wrong, and I think
once you've gone through that loss, I do think it takes away the innocence, I guess, of pregnancy, because you are waiting for it,
definitely. And it takes the joy out of it. And I just think, I was actually very lucky with Jack, because I'd fallen pregnant so quickly, and bar the sickness that I had with him, it was a really easy, straightforward pregnancy. Birth went a bit tits up, but birth's never perfect, is it? And but in terms of the naivety in that pregnancy of, oh, I'm pregnant and everything's fine and lovely, and then the subsequent ones afterwards were not quite that fine. But he was, apart from coming a bit early, and I was getting out sick for most of the pregnancy, but again, it was all fine, and so lucky. And he's a dream. He is a dreamboat. And I don't know whether it's like third baby you ship in or you ship out, don't you? But he got the memo. He got the memo, and he's so good. And Steve and I, every day, we just look at him and just go, oh God, like, we're so lucky. He's the best. Yeah, not better than the rest of them. Everyone's got their own qualities.
There's no favourites here.
No favourites here. Apart, from the 10-year-old who hates me because I won't buy him bottles of Prime, to the gorgeous little, 10-month-old who just looks at me like, you're the best thing.
But also, I think when you've got the old, I think something that when you've got older kids and you have a newborn, you do soak it up in a different way. Like, you've not got that. I don't know if I used to worry about every single thing with the first 2, whether I was doing it right or not. I had to put them in their cot because, I didn't want to make a rod for my own back, which is what everyone used to say. Whereas third one, I was like, gosh, he wants to sleep on me. Amazing. Let's lie down and lean into it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I've been like with Nate. And I think because I was so busy when he was born, because I hadn't finished the book, so I gave myself 2 weeks. The worst of times, the best of times, and the worst of times. But I gave myself 2 weeks postnatally, to kind of just rock in the corner and just get over what had just happened, and kind of just have my 2-week little baby bubble. But I was contracted. I was on a deadline. I had a publication date that we'd already pushed by a month, and so I needed to hit the second publication date. Otherwise, we'd lose the window and we'd have to wait a year. So I just had to finish. And so again, for about the next 2 months, I was just head down, trying to write, trying to look after baby. He was really refluxy. I was not sleeping. I think he was, I was feeding him and then having to keep him awake and then like upright after I fed him so he wouldn't vomit everything out. And then I'd have to do that for an hour. And by the time that hour had passed, I then had to feed him again. So I was stuck in this cycle, and I was still having to write. And I was seeing things that weren't there. I was so sleep deprived. At one point, Steve was like, "What are you doing?" I was on my hands and knees looking for spiders because I could see black things out the corners of my eyes running around on the floor that were not there. But I was so tired. And I now fully understand the phrase "lost the plot," because I got to like chapter 28 or something, and I was like, nope. No, but I actually think that how I got to the end of Mother Hens, which I'm now actually retrospectively very happy with how it ended, but it wasn't how I'd initially had it written. And I changed the ending, and it went bonkers. It went bonkers, but brilliantly bonkers. I thought, I was happy. I was happy with the ending, and then it did really well. So I was like, oh, do you know what? All's well that ends well. But I don't recommend it. People again, they go, well, have you got any advice about writing a book? I'm like, don't do it pregnant.
So one of my Paige Toon, who's one of my friends, she was telling me about writing one of her sort of bestsellers, her biggest hits. And she said that she was writing before, while she was pregnant, and then chucked out like something ridiculous, like 40,000 words just before she had a baby. But she would then write with her baby in a bouncer, just like gently rocking him in the bouncer while she was carrying on writing. So I was like, well, that's what it's going to be like when I'm on deadline as well. Yeah. When I had Buzz, I was like, I'll just put him in the bouncer, bounce him away and type. Oh no, that's never going to happen ever.
Buzz had different plans. No, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How was it introducing the older two to Nate?
Oh, do you know what? It was lovely. And I was very worried because Evelyn, God love her, was not on board with a third baby, not on board. And I'd obviously known that I was pregnant. And so I was then testing the water before telling them. And I kept trying to drop it in conversation. And it's been something that we'd floated about for years, but we'd kind of drop it into conversation with the kids. And she'd always been like, I'm the baby. It was that kind of, no one's coming to steal my crown mentality. Yeah. And so when I actually knew that I was, and I was trying to drop it into conversation with her, and she just got so fed up of me trying to subtly throw it into a conversation, she just turned around to me and she went, Mummy, if you had another baby, I'd just kill it, right? And I was like, oh God. Calling Steve, crying while he was at work, going, he's gonna have to sleep with us till he's 21 because she's gonna murder him with a pillow. And it was awful. And then we told them, so I'd waited until I was 12 weeks, and I'd had an earlier test, and I knew the gender. I knew it was a boy, and I thought, you know what, actually,
you decided to find out this time round.
Third time, I'd had enough surprises, G. I was like, that's fine. I don't need to know. I don't need anything else to surprise me. I'm happy with my first initial surprise. And again, the third bit was just more logistics. I was like, whose clothes am I going to have to dig out of the loft for him? It was that kind of thing. So I'd wanted to know, but also I felt like actually the most information that I could give Evelyn ahead of the event, I felt that would help her mentally prepare for it, because it'd be bad enough me going, I'm pregnant, and then losing it, which she did, and then going, it's a boy. And if she'd wanted a girl, and I was like, no, we just need to give them all the info up front, let them get their heads around it, and then they'll crack on. But we filmed it, and I deleted it. I had to delete it because it was that bad. Now I don't put the kids on social anyway, but it was for our own archives, our own family. But
even for your memory,
no, oh my gosh. So Jack was delighted. So unbeknown to us, he had separately asked Father Christmas for a baby brother the last Christmas, is what he asked for, but he hadn't put it on. He'd written a separate little list that he hadn't given us, and he'd put it on. He wanted a baby brother. He wanted a baby. So he
on 34th Street.
I know. I was like, babe, next year you're asking for like a Nintendo, okay? Don't be asking, don't be asking again. So he was delighted. She reacted probably how I thought, but just 10 times worse. She just erupted. She hit me. She threw herself on the floor. She was screaming uncontrollably. So she was 6, just turned 6 at the point that we told her. And she just, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't what I wanted. And so on the video, all you can see is Jack standing there on his own going, nobody's near him. Nobody's even within a foot of him. Steve and I have both just thrown ourselves on Evelyn to try, like she's a grenade. We've just tried to just stop the hysteria. And he's just like, on his, it's awful. So Steve was just like, we can never show anybody this video. And I was like, agreed. Let's just delete it from the deleted as well. We're never going back there. And then it took about an hour to coax her out from under the kitchen table by this point. So she's so hysterical. Steve's then crying because it's just awful. Jack then starts crying because he's never seen Daddy cry, so he doesn't know why Daddy's so he's just crying. He doesn't know why, but because everybody's so upset. I'm hormonal crying, so all four of us are just sobbing, and not in a good way. And then she only came round because I'd got a balloon with the gender thing. So I asked if she wanted to pop the balloon. And she was like, okay. And off she went to get pop the balloon. And I was just sitting there like, what has just happened? Why is she now like jumping on the sofa, popping the balloon when she's just had an absolute like hysterical outburst for the past hour? So that's, yeah. So.
And how did she react to having a brother?
So when she popped the balloon and saw that it was blue, she was like, I wanted a girl. And we were like, oh, okay. And then we kind of spun it. I was my old PR days. I was like, I'm going to flip this. I was like, but Evelyn, it's like, it means you're the only girl. And then she was like, oh, I was like, yeah. So we spun it, and then she was all right with it. But throughout the entirety of my pregnancy, she was very standoffish about it. Jack was all in, wanting to touch the bum, feel a baby move. Evelyn was like, nah, that's gross. I don't want to be anywhere near you. And she was just very, very cool about it. So I was so worried throughout all of it that she was going to be the same, and she just was not going to embrace this baby, and she was going to try and smother him with a pillow. And it was, I was just, and then when he was born, 2 days before, the hospitals had all changed their rules about COVID visitation.
Oh, right.
So they were allowed in, because I thought, again, this is going to be so awful if she can't come in to see. She's going to feel even more pushed out and even more like she's not part of it. So they changed it, and the kids were allowed in. And I've got the most beautiful video of the pair of them walking onto the ward, and she is just absolutely elated, her little face at seeing him, and she goes to touch his head, and then Jack goes and slaps her hand out the way, and he's like, no, Evelyn. She's like, I want to touch the baby, and she's there stroking him, and I've just got the most beautiful pictures, and she's so proud and happy in these pictures. And now, like, Naty Chops is her favorite thing in life. She hugs him and loves him to the point where it's a little bit, excessive. Poor kid. She comes home from school, she's like, in his face, he's like, very nervous disposition. And she loves him. And I've said to her since, like, well, what was it that you didn't, that you weren't happy about, that you were so upset about? And she said, because she couldn't see. She didn't understand what was happening. She didn't like the idea that there was something growing inside of me that she couldn't see, and she didn't know what it was going to do. But once he was out, that was fine. It was fine. So she loves him to pieces because he's out. But don't do it again. I'm like, it's fine, I won't.
So it's more a fear thing in that way, that you're not going to have another.
I'm not. Oh, no. Evelyn is terrifying. I mean, as she should be. You've got to raise strong girls, haven't you? You got to raise strong girls. So it's a fine line, though, isn't it? Of them being independent, and also just doing what you ask them to do when you want them to do it. But she's very feisty / terrifying. Yeah.
Well, you're not allowed to sing at home.
No. That is a big fat no. Disney. I'm not allowed to sing to Disney. Physically assaulted if I try and sing along to Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno. The fist comes out. I'm like, oh God, okay, I'm sorry. No, she's never let me. Never. Even when she was really little. We both had, I had a matching Frozen dress. I had a full size Elsa dress, and we would dance around the kitchen, obviously, as you do. And Anna as well. I don't want to show off. And when we do Frozen, there was no, she would scream at me. I'm not allowed to sing along to any of her faves. I know. I'm hoping that it'll get better as she gets older, but I've got a distinct feeling that it's not. It's only going to get worse, isn't it, really? I imagine.
So how old is everyone now?
So Jack is 10, Evelyn is 7, and Nate is just turned 10 months.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, we've got quite the expanse of
and
are
the older two, are they helpful when it comes to Nate?
They are, actually. They were, and the novelty has worn off a little, I have to say now. you know, well, the new baby face is gone, and now it's like, can you just sit with your brother for a minute? Fine, sorry. But they'll go and get a nappy for me. Oh, Evelyn actually has changed a pooey one, and she
wow.
wanted to, I know. Oh, she's come on leaps and bounds, leaps and bounds. So they are good with him, and when he laughs, his biggest laugh is always reserved for the other two kids. That and it's so sweet, and he loves them, and he's just fascinated by them, and he's trying to crawl at the moment, and he's just so desperate to get amongst them, which is going to be awful. I'm already just looking at everything around the house going, he'd dive, he touched that, he'd dive again. Like Jack just leaves his Lego just strewn everywhere. Like, the choking hazards are unreal everywhere. I'm just sitting in this room next to, and everything I can see is a hazard. It's a hazard. So we're such a long way past the baby proofing stage. I'm going to have to go back and we have to go back and just get all the gates on again because he's on the move. Brilliant.
Which the kids must find fascinating. The fact that he's calling, he's going to be standing up and walking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, at that point, he's a real person, isn't he? At the point that he can toddle about, and he's saying some words. Still not had a mama, which I'm not bitter and twisted about in the slightest. But it's fine because in the night when he's lying there going da 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 da, I'm like, Stevie wants you. It's a crying shame. It's a crying shame. I'll just it's fine. But yeah, a real person, real little person.
And how have you found it? Have you found you're approaching it differently now compared to first time around with Jack?
Oh yeah, I mean, he's just had to, like I said before, he's had to ship in or ship out with Nate. I mean, he's come at a point in my life where I'm busy, and I wasn't particularly busy when I had Jack. I'd quit my job because I'd asked to go part-time, and at that point it wasn't really the done thing to go part-time. I mean, I say that wasn't 10 years ago, but it wasn't, was it? It was, people like, nobody else in our office had a baby, and so I was the first, and they were like, oh, well, if you start doing it, then other people are going to want to go part-time, and we can't be having that. A workforce of flexible women, no thank you. So I'd quit and actually stupidly gone back to them as a freelancer, earning more money. I was like, fine, okay, you can pay me more to come and do less hours for you, that's fine. So I'd kind of dabbled with the freelance PR stuff when I was pregnant with him, but like life wasn't as busy, whereas now I'm writing, I'm on tour, so I start my stand-up tour or officially in September. So, he's into childcare a lot earlier than the other two ever were. And I've been, working around him, and I've been going away at weekends. And so, I'm very different, and I'm a lot more relaxed. And I think you ease into it, don't you? And you realize that, certain things that you think are just, make you the world's worst mother first time round, actually, third time round, it doesn't, been weaned on a sausage. I don't think Jack had anything like that. He was about 3. I don't think Jack didn't have a pack of chocolate buttons till he was 2, and Evelyn was like, "Can you try a bit of my Easter egg?" I was like, "Go for it, just a little bit, so he doesn't choke." It's just you do, don't you? You just like, oh, everything that I think thought was going to kill them, it isn't. It's fine. They're fairly resilient little people. They're humans. It's fine. So a lot more relaxed this time around. And I think it shows in him as well. He's so chilled, and I think it's possibly because we're really chilled. He's happy to go to anybody because he's been palmed off on the grandparents. He's been palmed off with friends who've looked after him for me while I've had to nip off and do work things. And he's just a happy little chap. He's just like, I'm just happy to be here, guys. So, don't mind me. Yeah. And doesn't matter. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we end the podcast with you completing 3 sentences. The first one is being a mum means.
The world. I'm going to go with the world. Do you know what? They have, I think, made me a better person. They have motivated me. They have completely changed my life. And I just feel that there is no greater joy. When everything boils down to it, there is all the things that I've done thus far that have been, great achievements, and I'm so proud of. But what it all boils down to is probably the thing that I'm most proud of is actually my 3 little people. I reckon. Is that a bit soppy?
No, it's perfect. And also, I think when you are stuck in the rut of the mundane of the day-to-day and trying to get people to continuously do stuff or say no all the time, whatever, it's good to just stop and just to take all that noise away and just see where you're at.
Yeah, exactly. And I think kids are brilliant for that, because like you said, you know, they're the first ones to ground you. They're the first ones, you know, they are, when everything comes down to it, I would stop everything that I would do now in a heartbeat for the kids. If they need me, if the kids were unwell, I'd cancel a show. If I had to be with the kids, I would just do anything to, you know, being a mum is my number one job at the end of the day. I mean, it pays atrociously and the annual leave is hideous, but it is my job. That is my job above everything else. Yeah.
Next sentence. Since having children, I
have not slept a lot. I've not slept a lot. I loved sleeping. Sleeping was like my absolute favorite thing. I was so lazy before I had kids. So lazy. Oh my goodness. I'd go to bed at like 11 or something. I'd just get up at about 2 or something. It was the weekend. just cash. That was it. I'd just sleep my life away. And people would be like, "I'll sleep when you're dead." I'd be like, "I don't care. It's lovely. I enjoy it so much." Don't do that anymore. And I do miss it. I do miss it quite a bit. I'm not going to lie.
And finally, I am happy when?
I am happy when I've got a margarita in my hand and my baby's all snuggled in. Drink responsibly. Drink responsibly.
Sophie, just remind me. So the tour, a lot of it is sold out.
Yeah. So the first run, so September, pretty much through to the middle of October, is sold out, and then we added on 50 more dates to that.
No
way. I know, it's mad. So actually we've got loads of shows in loads of different places. So some of the cities that I was sold out first time round, we've added bigger venues on. So if you go and have a little look see, and so it's all on my Instagram that you'll be able to find it.
And Mother Hens, when is that coming out in paperback?
Oh, that will be March next year. March next year.
So it's out now in hardback.
Out now in hardback.
Yes. Or on Kindle, all those places.
Yeah, everywhere where you can get books, all the places. Yeah, libraries and whatnot as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Nice just to sit down and have a NASA.
I know, isn't it just?
No,
kids,
thank
lovely.
you. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you.